Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? This is Finite FTG, and today I'm back again bringing you yet another Chaos Draft. Hosted another one in my Discord yesterday. It was super fun. Really happy we were able to do it. We should be getting a new alternative play calendar very soon. Also really looking forward to Modern Horizons 2. Planning on actually trying to stream that a bit. See if I can reanimate my old stream and get it up and running. But for now, let's dive into this Chaos Draft. Alright, so pack 1, pick 1 here. We have a pretty horrible rare. Just about as unplayable as you can get in Limited. And our uncommons here, not super exciting either. Changeling Titan is not a horrible card, but it's not a very exciting one either. Don't want to take it first. Devout Decree, card you could main deck, but probably shouldn't. Light of Promise, not a good card. And then somehow Warden of Evos Isle was a common, I believe, in this pack. I think there's like one set where it was printed at common. And it's a really tempting choice. I mean, I'm always interested in Wind Drakes, and the fact that it in particular wants you to play creatures with flying. And after my last draft, I'm really kind of thinking that, hey, maybe in this Total Chaos format, blue-white flyers is just always the way to go. I mean, this is a very tempting choice, to be sure. Borderland Marauder's good, but if I'm taking a red card here, it's going to be Open Fire. Open Fire is totally fine. Doesn't matter that it's 3 times the cost of Lightning Bolt. It's just a really nice removal spell, and generally just a better card than Winddrake. So despite my color biases, I ended up taking it over the Warden here, seeing if we can go into some kind of red strategy and be successful. Alright, so next up here, got some 4/4s in green. We have a 6-mana 4/4 Trample. Each other attacking Kavu is what that triggered ability says, so it doesn't count itself, which is unfortunate. Here we have an Indrik Stomp Howler. This is a nice card, probably more for Cube than Chaos Draft. You're not always going to find an artifact or enchantment in this format. Though, when you do, it's going to be a nice 2-for-1. Though, once again, keep in mind this is not a May, so be careful with how you build your deck if you're going to play this card. And then here we have Bitterbow Sharpshooters. 5-mana 4/4 Vigilance Reach. Solid abilities, makes the cost seem pretty affordable. I like that both of these cards only have 1 green mana symbol in them. And one of the things that I've learned is because blue-white flyers is such a strong presence in this format, if you're going to play green, you do need answers to flyers. And so picking them up early is a good way to make sure that your draft's going to be safe late. We also have a Rupture Spire. Fixing is always important, and this card is tempting to pick this early when there isn't a clear direction yet. There's also an Erratic Visionary here, which I'd be inclined to take, probably more so if I had taken the Warden last pick. But I ended up going with the Bitterbow Sharpshooters here. Pretty happy about that card and moving along to the next pick. Alright, so this was a tough one for me. So we have Abattoir Ghoul here, and this card is pretty powerful. Just 4 mana 3/2 First Strike is good. It was a nice card back in the Innistrad flashbacks for me. We have Gravedigger, just a classic 2-for-1. Excellent, iconic magic card, always good. And then here we have Slow Motion. So Slow Motion is a much more powerful card than you might think. It's really a house in the early game. What worries me is in the late game, it kind of loses relevance. And blue isn't really known for being super aggressive. You can make aggressive blue decks work with a lot of cheap flyers, but it's not something that's always going to work, and this format can be pretty slow. There's also a Woolly Loxodon here, but it's not really in the running for me. So I ended up going with Gravedigger here, pretty narrowly over the Slow Motion, but I've already passed a couple good blue cards, so I'm not really in a hurry to try to play blue. Alright, and then next up here, we have another couple good green cards. Here we have 5-mana 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land if you do draw a card, and then some Threshold ability. Threshold almost never happens, so I just try not to factor that into my evaluation of a card unless I have just some kind of way of putting additional cards into my graveyard. But 5 mana 4/4 sack a land, draw a card is a pretty solid card for Chaos Draft. And then here we just have 2 green for 3/3. And this card is excellent. Obviously, it's way above curve for what you would expect in Chaos Draft, or even most retail limited formats, even today. So definitely a strong contender. I think the Anerid could be the stronger card, potentially, but I already have a green 5-drop, and I'm really trying to make sure my curve works out. I have nothing like in the 2 mana slot so far, so went with the Colonian Tusker here over the Anerid, but not sure which is the stronger card. Alright, and at this point I'm thinking I'm trying to play a fairly aggressive deck. Pack 1, pick 5. See a bunch of good black cards in the pack. One of them is Bitter Revelation. This is a very powerful card, a little bit like Dark Bargain. There's another similar card, I think, that they just printed. But this card is very nice. Lets you look at 4 cards, puts the cards that you don't choose into your graveyard. We just picked up a Gravedigger, so there's a nice combo there. It does seem like black is open given the texture of this pack. And Wild Instincts is another really solid option. I don't even know whether it's better than Bitter Revelation. I think it probably is, narrowly, just because removal is so good in this format. That said, 6 mana removal is a bit worse. And removal where you don't get to choose what you're killing, yeah, even worse. But Wild Instincts, this card is pretty powerful. What pushed me over the edge was the idea that there are so many good black cards in this pack. If I can wheel any one of these, I'd be pretty happy. So I ended up taking the Wild Instincts. It's a good pick for signaling, and I'm pretty likely to wheel something good here. Alright, and then feeling bad about passing that Bitter Revelation with the Gravedigger, I am instantly vindicated because here we have another one, and I'm able to pick it up pretty easily. Somehow there's a second slow motion, which is pretty crazy, and they do get better in multiples. Here we have an Augur Spree, another good removal spell, but yeah, Bitter Revelation is really the only card I can put in my deck at this point, and I'm pretty happy to see another. Alright, and now I've picked up 2 mana 3/3, so why not a 3 mana 3/3? Just build a whole curve of them. There's really nothing else for me in this pack. Voracious Vampire is a super unexciting card, and 3 mana 3/3, although it's a lot worse than 2 mana 3/3 in general. It's still a pretty solid card, solid body, especially for Chaos Draft where a lot of things tend to be smaller. Alright, pack 1, pick 8. So at this point I'm still thinking my deck is pretty aggressive. I've picked up a 2 mana 3/3, a 3 mana 3/3. I can curve those into my Instincts, my removal spell that I just picked up. And now I'm thinking I have my choice of green 3-drop here. I can take 3 mana 3/2, effectively vanilla. I can take Twigwalker. I also have Silent Dart, and even though this card is totally serviceable, I'm deciding that, okay, because I'm trying to be kind of a tempo-oriented deck, I don't want to have to spend as much mana as this thing costs, and Twigwalker is a nice way of pushing through damage and just making the board a little bit more complicated for the opponent, which is generally the kind of effect I like. So I ended up taking that one here. Not a card I've played with before, and it is a pretty interesting one, I think. Right, next up, our first pack wheels. We have Forever Young in the pack, which is a heck of a lot better than our rare. Canopy Claws, not really a playable card, even though we want to have ways of dealing with flyers since we're in green. This is just not a very good way of doing that. And then Eternal Thirst, I decided was a little too bad, even though my deck was interested in trying to crunch in for large amounts of damage. So yeah, Forever Young, just a decent card. It's not card advantage or anything, but stacking the top of your deck can be pretty nice. Alright, and then next up here, we have a few interesting cards. So 6 mana 4/6 is a body that tends to be underrated. It's not the best body ever, but it is, I think, a decent one. That said, because we're also in green, I think we probably are going to have the opportunity to pick up better top end. Gift of Strength is fine. It's another nice way of dealing with creatures with flying. But here we have Gather Courage, and I don't think this card is necessarily the most powerful combat trick ever, but I think it's a really neat card. It's not quite like a mutagenic growth, but it's pretty close, and just the gotcha value of this card is pretty powerful. It's just going to be a pretty nice effect. Alright, and since we are interested in combat tricks, Jade Guardian, it's not the most appealing card ever, but 4 mana 3/3 hexproof. Hexproof is a very annoying ability, of course, and just being able to use combat tricks on this kind of with impunity is pretty nice. That said, there's a slow motion in the pack, and slow motion was one of the better cards in the pack the first time around. This means to me that there probably aren't too many people in this draft who know how good it is, or I don't think it would be here anymore at this point. That said, I don't want to play against this thing, whether someone knows how good this card is, or, even if they don't. So, even though the Jade Guardian is kind of interesting, I decided that it's not super likely to make my deck, and I really don't want to lose to slow motion if I don't have to. Alright, and then next pick here, we have Primal Visitation. There's a chance we're in red, right? We do have that open fire, but this is not a card we'd be willing to splash for, and we're pretty committed to green-black in particular, so not super interested in this. Timid Drake is a really nicely statted card, but it has quite the drawback. That said, it's still going to be a very annoying card. It's going to force your opponents to have creatures to play to return it to hand. You can give it pseudo-vigilance by playing a creature post-combat after attacking with it, and even though I don't think it's a very powerful card, I hate drafted this as well. Alright, and then this is pack 1, pick 13, the pack with the huge number of amazing black cards, and we were able to wheel a pretty good one here in Painful Lesson. It is generally going to be worse than Divination, but there's that little sign in blood value if you're able to mise someone with that. That could be neat. With the Bitter Revelation, it's starting to look like I might have a little less life to play with than I'd like, but I'm still happy to put it in my deck. And here we've wheeled a double on-color card in the Woodwraith Strangler. This card is quite bad. I picked it for signaling and because I think it's better than this horrible card, but not something I'm interested in playing. And then last up here we have a Voracious Vampire. This card is totally decent. It's a card we could play, but preferably we're not going to. Alright, and pack 2, pick 1 here. Upshifted to Mythic, apparently. We have a Hornet Queen. So this was really difficult for me, not joking, even though this card is insane, because it looks like my curve is pretty low at this point. I don't have too many 2-drops, but I am kind of leaning aggressive. I can go 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, or 2-drop, 3-drop removal spell, and only one 5-drop, I think, at this point. I'm really not sure. I'm interested in a triple green 7-drop, as good as this card is, and Death Pulse is a pretty great removal spell. So again, this was a difficult pick for me, but I did end up just going with this Hornet Queen, deciding that 7 mana isn't too much. I am in green. I can make the triple green work. I can make the 7 mana work. It does radically change my understanding of the deck I'm trying to draft, but it's such a powerful card. I just couldn't resist. Alright, next up here, we have really nothing exciting for green or black. We have an Acid Web Spider here, which is a Mammoth Spider with upside, but it is not super easy to cast. And I think this card is fine. I would be okay putting it in my deck, but I ended up going here with the Iron Mirror. Now that I've picked up a 7-drop, ramp is going to be at a premium. And this reminded me, hey, yeah, I picked that Open Fire, pack 1, pick 1, so maybe that thing is going to be back on the menu. But regardless, pretty happy with Iron Mirror, always looking to smooth out my curve, and yeah, now that I have a 7-drop, definitely going to be looking for some ramp. Okay, and then we have an extremely difficult pick, in my opinion. I tanked here for quite a while, not sure I made the right decision, though in terms of gameplay, I am happy with what I went with here. So first up we have Soul's Fire. This is a good removal spell. A lot of the creatures in our deck have pretty high power. And we just picked up a piece of red fixing. We already have that open fire, so there's definitely a temptation for us to try to splash this, and it's not super unreasonable to expect that we'd be able to do that. On the other hand, we have Bitter Revelation, not number 2, but number 3 of this draft. Somehow, this card just showed up in spades. I've only drafted one of the 2 that I've seen so far, and this is a powerful effect, to be sure. That said, my 4-drop slot is getting a little crowded. I don't know how many effects like this I can afford, especially with the losing 2 life, just a card like this that doesn't affect the board. So even though it's such a strong card, I ended up, after, again, quite a while tanking here, going with Slime Molding. Not the most powerful magic card ever, pretty weak against bounce spells. However, super flexible card, excellent in the late game. I only have the 1 5-drop right now. Remember, I don't have like Excavating Anarid, for instance, and I didn't pick up the kind of Mammoth Spider just last pick, so Slime Molding here is going to give me some nice flexibility. Alright, well, speaking of very powerful cards here, we have a much easier pick, as there's really only a Reaper of Night, and anyone who's played Throne of Eldraine Limited knows exactly how powerful this card is. Doesn't matter that each half of the card is overcosted by about 1 mana. The fact that you have these 2 halves stapled together, it's just a mind rot with flashback turn into a 4/5 with conditional evasion, and that's amazing. Okay, and then next up here we have another easy pick, as we have an Evolution Charm and nothing else really in the pack. We have Breath Stealer, which is kind of a cool card. I like the art, but not a very powerful one. Evolution Charm in particular is great with that Hornet Queen, because 1, it can find us a land to get closer to the Hornet Queen. It can fix us for triple green as well. It can also fix our splash for the open fire if that's something we're interested in. And if the Hornet Queen dies, we can just return it to our hand, just like with the Gravedigger. So we're starting to see some real inevitability come together. If we draw or mill with the Bitter Revelation, that Hornet Queen, the opponent's just going to be in a world of hurt, because we have already multiple ways to get it back. Alright, pack 2, pick 6. Totally fine card here. Springmane Servan, card from Strixhaven, and a functional reprint of a card, I want to say from Guilds of Ravnica. Maybe that's not correct, but it was a card around that time, did the exact same thing. And yeah, the card's fine. 3 mana, 3/2 is not exciting, but the 2 life really makes up for that slightly inadequate body. Okay, and now here we have a pick where there are 2 cards that are pretty appealing. We have Rakshas's Secret. That said, we did just pick up the Reaper, and we don't need multiple Mind Rot effects. I still felt like at this point I was playing a pretty board-oriented deck, and I ended up taking this Dragon Scale boon, just because it's a powerful combat trick. Untapping can be a surprise, and the 2 counters obviously are permanent, so I thought it was decent. Then next up here, Fiery Conclusion is fine, but we're not going to splash for it. Gloom Pangolin would be a card we're interested in here if we're trying to play Hornet Queen, but we already have a bunch of cards that are better, I think, in the 3 mana slot. So here I ended up going with Pulse of Marasa, another card that's technically in the 3 mana slot, but just another nice way of being able to return things. The 6 life really makes a big difference. This is much better than just like a Disentomb, for example. It's a card I'm not sure I should main deck, but a card I do like. Alright, and then next up here, if we had taken that Rakshas's Secret, maybe we could take this Cartographer, and we could just live in this world where we've picked up a bunch of mill cards, and we can turn this Cartographer into sort of like a Civic Wayfinder kind of thing. But it seemed a little too unlikely that we'd be able to make that work. So I went with this Adaptive Snapjaw, just because we were a bit low on 5-drops. Not a card I'm planning on putting into my deck, but hey, maybe we end up with a lot of creatures with high toughness, and that means we're able to evolve it reasonably well. Alright, next up here, there's only one on-color card for us in Mirror Incubator, and this card is very bad, so I'm not interested in drafting it. So I took just a Hampering Snare here, just continuing to hate draft blue cards. This is not a very powerful one, But I think imaginary threats is pretty bad. Almost maybe 80% of the time or higher, this thing just gets cycled, and this card can actually be pretty annoying. So that's why I took it over the threats. Then next up here, Soulless One. We do have, I think, 2 zombies with Gravedigger and the plant zombie in our sideboard. But I went here with the Magnetic Web. It's kind of an interesting card. If I end up in a really board stally matchup, I could see maybe trying this thing out, but it's probably going to hang out on the sideboard. Next up here, it's looking at a Poison the Well as a card we could bring in against maybe decks with greedy mana bases. But I ended up going for Phyrexian Battleflies. This is another card that you could maybe play against decks where you end up in board stalls a lot. Maybe you're able to get in for a couple damage in the air per turn. Alright, and then next up here, got a Silver Chase Fox. This card is a lot more playable than the Axis of Mortality, so that's why we went with the Fox. Then here, Fog is a card that we could bring in from the sideboard. It's going to be better than the Nettling Curse. And then here we have a Blood Pet. Next up here, pretty horrible pack for us, unfortunately. There's really nothing we want to play. We have a Bant card and the Bant land, which is pretty funny. I ended up going with this Death by Dragons because I don't think I'm playing a single black or green card from this pack. And Death by Dragons is a very powerful card. Unlike the Diamond Fairy, it's pretty easy to cast if you're in red. Alright, and then this draft we're just seeing tons of multiples. Here we see Gravedigger number 2. And Gravedigger number 2 is of course extremely powerful because it allows you to loop the Gravediggers. There's a Savage Swipe in the pack. I have almost no creatures with 2 power though, so for the most part this is Prey Upon. Prey Upon is not a card I like. There's also a Dusk Legion Zealot in the pack. I think this card is fine. I don't think this card is particularly great. I do think it's good. It's technically card advantage, but the card advantage you're getting is a 1/1. I do like it a decent amount, and more importantly here, my curve was really suffering. I've taken a lot of 4-mana cards, and even though I would love this Gravedigger, it just seemed irresponsible to pass a 2-drop that could smooth out my curve and help me hit land drops. So yeah, it's never easy to pass a Gravedigger, especially a Gravedigger loop, but I thought that the Dusk Legion Zealot was just the more disciplined choice, so that's what I went with here. Alright, and then here, I am snapping up this Rugged Highlands, not thinking twice about it. We do have a 3-mana 3/3 with Downside, which is still something I'm interested in. But at this point, this is going to make it a reasonable option to play the Open Fire. And maybe now there's a world. I do have the 1 in a green instant, the charm that can find a land, and I have that Iron Mirror. So maybe there's a chance that I'm able to double splash the Death by Dragons too. But Rugged Highlands, regardless, is easily going to be the pick for me here. Alright, we do have Lightning now as another powerful card that we could consider splashing, but this pack in general is just pretty insane. We have Tajuru Pathwarden, very powerful 5-drop. We have Tangle Asp, totally fine, 2-mana 1/2, it effectively has Death Touch, not unlike the Lowland Basilisk here. Here we have Terror, which is just very powerful, very efficient removal spell. No idea how this thing is still in the pack here at pick 4. Once again, I'm going to do my trick of taking the 1 real black card and hoping I can wheel something in green. Alright, and then this pack, things drop off quite a bit. There's really nothing I'm interested in here. Don't want either of these cards particularly badly. Blessings of Nature is not a card I love. Obviously, the Miracle cost is excellent. 5 mana put 4 counters on things is not bad. It can get blown out for sure, and there are times where you just won't even have any targets. On the other hand, Withering Boon, it's a really funny card. The art is kind of grotesque, but Essence Scatter is a pretty good limited card. So Essence Scatter, where you have to pay 3 life as well, I still think that's a pretty good card. So I ended up taking it here. 1 in a black to counter a creature spell is just a good rate, and 1 in a black in particular, no one's going to see that coming. Alright, here we have pack 3, pick 6. I have a Llanowar Elves here. So Llanowar Elves, this card is just absolutely amazing for what I'm trying to do. I have nothing to do on turn 1. This speeds up everything so much, and speeding up the Hornet Queen in particular is just amazing. It helps with my curve. It helps, like I said, with the Hornet Queen. It even taps for one of the 3 green symbols in that card. And yeah, I mean, don't know how it's your 6th pick, but very, very happy to pick it up. Alright, then next up here, we have another ramp card in the Zerta Druid. This one's a bit worse. We'd have to splash for it. Still a powerful card. Some kind of shenanigans you can do with it if you can untap it a bunch. But there's also a Wild Mongrel in the pack, and Wild Mongrel is just a classically very powerful card. It's not going to be great here because I have 0 cards with Madness. Even so, I have some Gravedigger and other return effects, so it's not like it's horrible here either. Definitely going to be a good 2-drop, and it's just so difficult to block. Alright. And then here, there's really nothing we're super interested in. Panic Spellbomb, not a card we really want to put in our deck. Same with Trumpet Blast. These aren't cards we're going to splash for. Here we have Inner Calm, Outer Strength. This card can be a pretty big pump spell, but it's also 3 mana and it doesn't give trample, so it seems like a pretty awkward card to me too. So not a card I'm planning on playing, but decided there was nothing in this pack that needed to be hate drafted, and there's a non-zero chance I try that card out. On the other hand, we have this pack again, and this pack is just horrible. Crypt Creeper is not a card I'm going to put in my deck. Neither is Touch of Moonglove, neither is War Mammoth. So here I ended up going with Diamond Fairy, noticing that the Bant land that helps cast this thing is now missing from the pack. I don't want to let somebody somehow take that land and then wheel this thing and end up actually able to cast it. There's nothing for me here, so I might as well just take a decently powerful magic card. Now, pack 3, pick 10 here. First time around, I was looking at that Savage Swipe, and I was thinking, okay, well, I don't really have any creatures with exactly 2 power. We do have a Giant Spider here, and even though at some point earlier I was thinking that I had too many 4-drops, Giant Spider is a pretty nice card. 4 toughness goes a long way, and reach, again, is pretty powerful against creatures with flying. So I'm thinking, minimally, this is going to be a really good sideboard card against a deck with flyers, and maybe it's even a card I could start in my deck. So I ended up taking that one here. Now, pretty similar things to say about Lowland Basilisk. 3 mana for 1 power is not where I want to be. The Pseudo Death Touch is pretty nice, and the 3 toughness is good as well. So ended up taking this card, thinking there's not a very high chance that I put this in my deck, but just in case, I mean, it's better than whatever else is in this pack. Alright, then here we have a Relic Crush. This card is a fine sideboard card. In this pack I took Savage Thallid. 2 toughness makes it pretty vulnerable. Demolish here as a pretty unplayable sideboard card, but better than Boggart Shenanigans. Then here we have Majestic Heliopterus to finish things off. So this is how I ended up building the deck. Decided not to double splash that Death by Dragons. It's just a little too irresponsible, and I do have really reasonable fixing for Open Fire with Evolution Charm, Iron Mirror, Rugged Highlands, and the Single Mountain for the Evolution Charm. Did end up playing the Hornet Queen, of course, and with 2 ways of ramping, it's looking quite powerful. I do think I made one mistake here in my deck building, and I'll return to that in the matches, and that is Pulse of Marasa versus Twigwalker. So Twigwalker is a card that I thought would be strong when my deck was going to do a lot of attacking, but if you look at my curve, look at my removal spells, and the fact that I'm really trying to ramp into my expensive cards and win the game that way, I really start having a much more defensive looking deck, and Twigwalker is not going to be quite as good for a deck like that. Alright, so now is going to be a great time to remind people about my Patreon that I've just started. So if you've enjoyed watching my videos, if you want to support me, again, I don't expect this, but would very much appreciate it, consider donating to my Patreon. The link is in the description. Alright, and we are back now with game 1 of round 1. So I'm on the draw, able to keep this hand. It's a pretty good one. It's kind of only trying to get to Hornet Queen, but Painful Lesson does do that well. We're able to draw Iron Mirror, which It's going to be a nice way of ramping us to it. Remember, in this deck, it's going to be important to lead on Forest with my double green 3/3. The opponent has Marauder's Axe into Phyrexian Rager. The opponent, of course, being the co-host of my podcast, Crackshot, aka Jakob. So here I drop a Wild Mongrel. Not looking very good in the face of the Marauder's Axe. Normally, it's really important to be able to pump the toughness to get the Mongrel to survive the creature it's in combat with, and that just doesn't seem to be something we'll be doing here against like a 4/2. Opponent drops a Fuming Effigy, card from Strixhaven. Didn't think much of this at the time, but it's actually an amazing card in the opponent's deck. We go for a Painful Lesson here. If we had played the Dusk Legion Zealot, we could have had an extremely mana efficient turn, but unfortunately we didn't know that there was a 3 mana 3/3 on top of our library. The opponent here goes for a Pyreheart Wolf. Nice powerful card that, I mean, it's a 3 mana 1/1 with Undying that gives your stuff menace when you attack. So, it's going to be difficult for me to answer. I decided here to go for an Evolution Charm to find a swamp. Going to rely on my Iron Mirror to cast the Open Fire, and it's feeling a little clunky that, for instance, this last turn I couldn't go Painful Lesson into DLZ because I was missing double black, so trying to prevent myself from missing double black when I need it later. So here I go for a Centaur Courser, and I'm thinking about Open Fire main phase here, thinking about Dusk Legion Zealot, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to Open Fire on my opponent's turn, probably going to kill the Fuming Effigy, in which case I want their creatures to attack first, so I can have them make a decision about the attack and then make it a bit worse for them, or I can use the Iron Mirror even to block after the creatures gain menace. Another option would be killing the Pyreheart Wolf, which doesn't really seem as appealing because it has Undying, but regardless, I've decided to pass here and use the Open Fire on the opponent's turn. So I decide here to change my plan, go for an Open Fire on the Pyreheart Wolf. Part of the appeal here is that the opponent really doesn't have a good attack without the Pyreheart Wolf coming in. We do put a counter on the Undying creature, which is going to get it a little bit closer to being dead for good, and they can't re-equip the Marauder's Axe because we're in beginning of combat. So Pyreheart Wolf dies and comes back and triggers the Fuming Effigy. So I jokingly say Wombo in the chat because they dealt me a damage with it, but that Fuming Effigy, just see if you can keep track of all the ways that card does amazing things here. So they go for a bit of revelation of their own, not super surprising because we passed 2 of them during this draft, and they put 2 great cards into their graveyard, Invading Manticore and Murderous Redcap. Yet another way of triggering that Fuming Effigy. So this is very suspicious. I don't really know what's going on, if their other 2 cards are just like insane bombs or what, but I know one thing for sure, which is that this can't be good for me. I take this opportunity to slam Hornet Queen on turn 6, which feels pretty good. Hornet Queen just being a pretty amazing card in general, and they're going for some kind of Convoke thing here. It's not Sprout Swarm, they don't have any green. It's Unmake the Graves, yet another way of triggering that Fuming Effigy. Not to mention an excellent 2-for-1 in combo with that Bitter Revelation. So yeah, they do trigger the Fuming Effigy. They get the Red Cap and the Manticore back. And they Murderous Red Cap down the Hornet Queen. Hornet Queen is a card I actually kind of want to die. Just because I have so many ways of returning it from my graveyard to my hand. One of them being Evolution Charm, that's already in my graveyard, but I still have the Pulse of Marasa, which is in the sideboard, unfortunately, and I do have Gravedigger as well. So the opponent decides to pass here, probably correctly. I go for a Dusk Legion Zealot here, and draw a Lowland Basilisk. And I believe I go for Reaper of Night, yes. And even though the opponent isn't on 2 cards, ideally you are going to be using that Harvest Fear when the opponent is on exactly 2 cards. I decide that it's important for the sake of mana efficiency just to set up being able to cast the Reaper next turn. And I really don't want to cast Reaper without having use the Mind Rot effect. Decide reluctantly to play the land. It's always a difficult choice when you have Wild Mongrel in play, whether to play lands. But I ended up doing it just because I want to have mana efficient turns in the future. Like if I draw a 2-drop, for instance, I believe I can cast it and Reaper of Night next turn. Attack with a couple insects. Opponent takes the damage. Opponent attacks with just the Murderous Redcap, which is a very suspicious attack. Not really sure what's going on, but I decide that I can just throw my 3/3 in front of it without thinking too much about it. And they do end up trading here. Of course, the opponent gets another Fuming Effigy trigger, and they have a 1/1 Redcap in play. And they play the Invading Manticore. And now we are able here to drop this Reaper of Night, which I chose to play over the 2 creatures because the opponent's on 2 cards in hand and I might be able to start chipping in for damage. I left all my insects back here just because the opponent now has a ton of bodies and I'm worried about a big attack. And here's a big attack. They spent a removal spell on one of my insects, which, you know, feels pretty bad for them. They've now played a couple, used a couple ways of killing creatures just to kill sort of half of the Hornet Queen. And now try to make some good blocks here. Not really playing around much, though I do need to kill this Pyreheart Wolf because another Menace attack is basically going to be game over for me. So I decide that I need to put 2 insects on it to kill it. Don't really have much of a better choice right now. I'm losing all my creatures with 1 toughness, and my 4/5 hopefully is going to survive. I would have put my Wild Mongrel into combat as well. If I had 1 more insect, then I would have blocked either the Phyrexian Rager or the zombie token with the Mongrel and the insect. But here I ended up having to take 5 damage. And it looks like things are going to be okay. Notice that it said paying costs slightly before damage, and now they're paying costs after. Just trying to make sure I had no tricks with my Iron Mirror, I guess. And yeah, they do Lightning Blast my Reaper. So things are looking pretty rough for us at this point. They equip the Axe, which fortunately is not a huge problem because we are able to drop the Giant Spider. And then I go for the Lowland Basilisk as well, just for the sake of mana efficiency rather than playing the Colonian Tusker. Opponent re-equips to the Rager, attacks. I decide to trade with the 1/3 Death Toucher. Opponent equips to the Zombie Army. So this Marauder's Axe is doing a lot of work for them. Here I go for an attack with both, thinking that the Tusker is going to be able to hold back whatever creature they equip to the axe and attack with, even though it's not an ideal trade, and leaving these 2 lands in hand for the Mongrel. Opponent trades for the Spider, which is probably a good choice. Technically I could discard 3 cards if they wanted to single block the Mongrel, even though that sounds pretty bad for me. That said, they don't know that I have any spells in hand. So now they go for a Morgue Burst, getting the Manticore back and killing my Tusker, which is horrible for me. They're able to equip the Redcap and attack for 3 as well, so now I'm in really, really rough shape. But I draw Slime Molding, which is amazing here. So I realize that the Manticore itself is a 4/5, with the Axe it's a 6/5, so I need to have 7/7 here in order to be able to block it and have my creature not die. So I play the land, make a 7/7 Slime Molding, go for a really greedy attack here with the Wild Mongrel. If they have a way of killing my Ooze, I'm going to be in trouble. But I decided I really needed to push damage when I could, still leaving the Mountain in hand for future attacks. And the opponent plays the Manticore and passes. That's a good sign for me. Here I have a Bitter Revelation, which is pretty precarious given my life total, but I still have to cast it. And here we have Springmane Servant and Withering Boon, 2 cards that kind of offset each other. obviously taking both of those over the lands, which don't do anything at this point. Do decide to play the land from my hand, just so I'm able to hold up the boon this turn. Though I already said the revelation was precarious for my life total, so of course the boon isn't really helping things. Opponent goes for a Fetid Imp, which I immediately have to counter. I have nothing with reach, and the Marauder's Axe is going to turn that thing into a pretty scary threat. No one expects the black counterspell, of course. And here I consider trying to go for an attack, thinking that, okay, next turn if they don't block this, then I'll have 2 lethal threats, because I can discard 2 cards to Wild Mongrel, and the Ooze itself is a lethal threat. But I decide that's just a poor choice. If I attack with my 7/7, the opponent can re-equip the axe to the zombie, then they have 2 lethal threats, which means I'm trading with one creature and chumping the other, which sounds pretty horrible. So really need my 7/7 to live. Opponent is just passing, and here we draw Terror, which is an amazing draw, because the opponent, the way they have things set up right now, it looks like they want to put the 4/5 and the 3/1 on the 7/7 if they're going to double block it. Their other option could be chumping it, and if they do double block it, then the Terror is just going to be amazing. Even if they don't double block it, the Terror still kills their 4/5, which is their biggest creature. Pretty crazy, because Terror is not very good versus this opponent, and it just so happens to get their best creature in this spot. And so I go for the attack, trying to elicit the 2-for-1, and I am able to get it here. Killing that 4/5 and that 3/1, the opponent is left with a measly 2/2 versus my board. They go for an equip. They can't afford to attack here. I am setting up to have multiple lethal threats, and here I decide to just go for this Wild Instincts on the Ooze token. It seems like the opponent doesn't have any removal. I think they would have used it already if they did, and I think it's probably safe to go for this play. So I do. Opponent scoops it up, because of course we have a lethal attack after the zombie is cleared. Alright, game 2, and we have an interesting hand here, not a bad one. We're able to Evolution Charm for either a swamp or a mountain, depending on what we need. And we draw Colonian Tusker, which is going to be nice for us. Opponent has a Fetid Imp. We're going to drop the Tusker, try to delay the decision on what to get with the Evolution Charm for as long as possible. Opponent attacks for 1. Plays a 1/4, stonewalls my 3/3. Now I've drawn 3 black cards, and even though I have a bunch of swamps in the deck, I only have 1 red card. So I really need to be able to play my black cards, so I'm going to Evolution Charm here for a swamp, make sure I don't miss my land drop. And just passing, opponent attacks for 1 in the air, misses their land drop, and here I just want to hit my land drop over being mana efficient with the Servant, so Dusk Legion Zealot, and I do draw a forest, which is nice. Now I'm passing here, trying to find another land for my sharpshooters. Opponent has a Serpent Warrior. We have a great answer to that in the Wild Instincts, because as we draw 3/3 of our own, it gives us an attack through the Stune Beetle, which is excellent. So we crunch in for 5 and kill the opponent's creature. Opponent attacks us for 1, and they have a Sting Mogi. So pretty janky card, but they are able to remove counters to blow up lands, and we only have 1 black source at this point. We really need all of our lands to cast our spells, so, and the opponent hasn't shown us many targets for Terror. Out of the 4 creatures they've played, this is the only legal target for it, so go ahead and Terror the Sting Mogi, drop the Centaur Courser, pass the turn. We're going to be able to start crunching with these 3/3s pretty soon. And the opponent has Pitchburn Devils. Another reasonable Terror target, but this thing's going to 2-for-1 us no matter what, because we have a 3/3 in play. Pretty annoying card, but we can fight through it. We do have a ton of resources in hand here, so just go ahead and accept the 2-for-1 attacking into the Devils, which kills both of our 3/3s. Then we drop the Sharpshooters here, which can trade for the Fetid Imp in a couple different ways. They can give a Death Touch on blocks or on attacks, and of course, Sharpshooters has reach. Opponent has Sedgemoor Witch, excellent card. We would like to kill that with open fire if possible. And we have Reaper of Night here. And I believe I do not use that yet. I believe I attack here, get the opponent to trade with the Fetid Imp, and I just cast a Gravedigger, getting back the Sharpshooters. Not a very good trade for us, obviously, but one that we're kind of forced to make because the opponent has a Death Toucher, and the fact that we have a Gravedigger to get it back does kind of soften the blow. Opponent has Fuming Effigy and passes the turn. We are now able to harvest Fear, getting rid of their last two cards. Their cards are all very strong, so probably going to have some good hits here. We get rid of a Fool's Tome, ironically, as we make them Hellbent, and a Spread the Cygnus. So definitely some nice hits for us there. Drop the Rugged Highlands and just pass the turn. Now the open fire is going to be turned on. Opponent just passes back. Even though they have more creatures and bigger ones, they somehow don't have any good attacks here. And here we just go for the Reaper of Night. It's the mana efficient play. Opponent only has one card in hand, which means next turn they're drawing up to 2, so we're going to have that evasion turned on the Reaper. And you can see here we've sided in the Pulse of Murasa. I've mentioned this before, but this card just should have been in our main deck. It works really well with what we're trying to do, and in terms of the matchups we ended up playing, it was definitely a good choice. So here we attack with the Reaper of Night, putting the opponent down to 8 life, and I think here we just played 2 creatures over trying to use the open fire. Yeah, just trying to get a good board presence so I can make some large attacks coming up. So here the opponent has 3 cards in hand, which is definitely annoying for the Reaper of Night, but our creatures are bigger and better at this point, so not super worried about getting into combat with them, so we get to make a pretty big attack here. The Gravedigger would have served as well if we wanted to open fire the Fuming Effigy pre-combat, but that's not something we're interested in here, so hoping to blow out a double block basically on the Reaper of Night or similar. But the opponent has Incite War, which is a pretty annoying card. They give everything first strike, and they have 2 good double blocks here, lining up to kill the Reaper and the Bitterbow without losing anything. So really difficult decision for me here in terms of what to use the open fire on. I do want to use the open fire on a creature, not the opponent's face, because, I mean, just trying to burn them out doesn't seem like the best strategy here. So I decide that even though I would really, really love to kill the Sedgemoor Witch, I think it's more important to just save my Reaper of Night, which is really going to limit the spells that they're able to play. So I go ahead here and use the open fire on the Fuming Effigy. And yeah, we are able to kill both of the opponent's creatures, blocking that. Our other creature gets eaten and the opponent takes 3 damage. Here we just drop a Lowland Basilisk. Now too that we've cleared the Fuming Effigy, the Gravedigger has a good attack, the Basilisk has a fine attack. Opponent has Murderous Redcapped, presumably killing our Servan, yep. And opponent has Lampad. So Lampad's going to be able to gain them life, but they also just went down to 1 card in hand, which means on board we can put them to 2 life with our Reaper. We have the Pulse of Murasa if we wanted to get back the Bitterblow Sharpshooters in play at this turn, but here we just attack with the Reaper, and I just cast an enormous Forever Young in terms of number of targets. I'll pop out my graveyard here so you can get an idea. Targeting, 4 creatures? So we're drawing just gas for the next few turns here. Even if something else dies, we have that Pulse of Murasa. And yeah, that's just enough for the opponent to scoop it up. And yeah, we are 1-0 now against a very strong Rakdos deck. Very synergistic too. Alright, we are back for round number 2. Nice hand here. Land of War Elves makes this entire hand great. third mana source casts the Colonian Tusker on turn 2, but we just draw a forest, so we don't even need the elf to cast the Tusker. And yeah, I cast it pre-combat and go for an attack for 1. There are some cards that could blow me out, but I'm not too worried. Opponent misses a land drop. This is looking great for me. Cast a Bitter Revelation. But unfortunately I turned on their negate, which is a pretty big blowout. Could be in trouble here if the opponent weren't missing land drops and if we didn't have 4 power and toughness already in play. Opponent has just basically a sorcery speed unsummon on my 3/3. Go for a Dusk Legion Zealot pre-combat here, and decide that I'm just going to be playing Forest and a Tusker and attacking for 1. The Elf is really chipping in there. Opponent misses another land drop, unfortunately. We get another big attack. Not even playing the Gravedigger, just to get like a 2/2 in play. It's probably a consideration, but I decided that it wasn't worth it. And the opponent just scoops it up. Too many missed land drops. Really unfortunate for them, because presumably a hand with 2 islands is a keep from their position. So I've heard that the opponent's deck is aggressive, and Pulse of Marasa probably just should have been in my main, so I've brought that one in. Have a nice hand with Natural Tron here. Really depending on this Iron Mirror to get us going, though, against an aggressive deck while we're on the draw. Opponent has a 1-drop. It's getting in there. And Rimrock Knight now. So really putting a ton of pressure on me. Unfortunately, I can't use the Iron Mirror to convoke the Gather Courage. It wouldn't even be good against the Rimrock Knight. I would just turn the Mirror into a 3/3, but I'm really just praying that I'm able to cast a turn 3 Giant Spider, and the Spider is able to cast the Gather Courage. Opponent has a Tormenting Voice, so things are looking good for me on that front. They get in for 4, already down to 15. But I do play that Giant Spider, and I'm really just hoping it's going to hold the ground for me. Opponent has a Firebolt on my Mirror, which is annoying because my Hornet Queen is now a turn slower. But they are unable to attack, and I'm very happy about that. That said, if they were able to attack, I'm pretty sure my Gather Courage would have been excellent too. Here I go for a Bitter Revelation. No fear. If they have the negate again, well, negates, I guess, in the bin for Tormenting Voice, but losing 2 life is still scary against them. So here I take the 2 spells. Once again, Pulse of Marasa looking excellent. Because I'm at 13, even the Dusk Legion Zealot is going to make me lose another life. And the opponent drops 1/2 Trample with Pump ability. I go for Dusk Legion Zealot here. And I believe I just, go Forest Pass, holding up my 3 instants. We are slowly getting close to that Hornet Queen. Opponent has a Kuldotha Ringleader. That card is pretty annoying for me, just because the fact that it is a pretty large creature that gives other creatures good attacks, like the Rimrock can now attack. Not very well because I still have the Dusk Legion Zealot in play, but it's just annoying for me. So I do think I go for a Pulse of Marasa end of turn here. No, I didn't. Okay. Guess I had nothing exciting to return still. Probably just the Iron Mirror. So I go for Servant instead, and the Servant is okay. Gaining the life is nice, and I can still cast the Pulse of Marasa if it gets like Firebolted or whatever here. And they cast Fissure on my Giant Spider, which is even worse for me. So now the opponent goes for pretty reasonable attack. We go for the Pulse of Marasa on the Giant Spider, gaining some life, importantly, and just getting back a nice defensive card. Put the 1/1 on the 4/1 and the 3/2 on the 2/1, deciding that the evasion that 1-drop can give is more relevant because it can allow that 4/4 to keep getting through. And I do cast the Gather Courage, which again makes things pretty nice for me. So now I am able to resolve Hornet Queen against a blue deck, so you never know if they have a counter, and this is definitely a great time to play it. I think that Ringleader has to attack as well, which means it will be trading for an insect. Opponent has Scrivener. getting back Fisher. Pretty strong sequence, but it's just going to be too difficult to beat Hornet Queen here. They go for a reasonable attack. They get to trample over for 1, but we're just trading, snap trading, of course. Here we get to put them to 1 card in hand with the Harvest Sphere. Not the 0 ideal, but we're actually able to get aggressive here now because we're able to play Giant Spider post-combat. The opponent recognizes this and trades. And yeah, now we're in a pretty commanding position with Evolution Charm to get Hornet Queen back if it dies. And opponent flashes back Firebolt on the Hornet Queen. So here we go for a Reaper. Not in a hurry to get that Hornet Queen back. If we draw a land, we can do it next turn with Evolution Charm and just cast the thing. If we don't draw a land, we can just play Gravedigger. Opponent fishers our 4/5, which makes sense. Definitely good way to answer that thing. And we draw an Open Fire, which is not a land, so it's time to Gravedigger and get back Hornet Queen. And that prompts the concession from the opponent, as, I mean, why wouldn't it? Alright, then here we are back for the finals, 2-0-4-0 at this point, pretty exciting. And we have pretty decent hand here, really leaning on that Terror to do something and hoping we draw some creatures. Opponent has a 2-mana 3/1, which we could play the Mirror out and we can use the Mirror to cast the Open Fire, but taking 3 damage in the meantime. There are going to be other good targets for the Open Fire, so I decide that it's fine to just use the Terror here. It feels a little bit loose, but I just don't want to take damage in chunks of 3, and the opponent is in the finals for a reason. Something could easily go wrong for us here. So they play a card with protection from the colors of our deck that really have removal, which is pretty annoying. But we are able to play 3-mana 3/2, holding up that Gather Courage. So the opponent goes for an attack here. We could go for it. I think I probably would. Just try to get that annoying rare off the battlefield. Opponent does not go for an attack, recognizing that they would not be winning the race. Here I go for a Lowland Basilisk, which can actually start attacking here if I want to. Opponent's using their Scryfish, which is a pretty powerful and annoying card. Go for an attack for 1 here, see if I can draw out some kind of removal spell or pump spell or something, but I cannot. Play the Iron Mirror and pass the turn. Opponent has a Reviving Vapors, so kind of an Anticipate, but they're going to gain some life from it. Not the most powerful card, but not a terrible one. Let's see what they got. Oh yeah, I believe they took Zhalfirin Decoy here. Pretty powerful card in their deck as well. So the opponent goes for an attack. I believe I decided that I didn't want to use the Gather Courage here. Into 4 open mana seemed like not the best decision. Yeah, they do have the Decoy. They have a Felidar Cub. So here we have an interesting turn. Unfortunately, I eliminated one of my options here by going to combat too quickly. I think, not sure whether this was the best play, but it would have at least been a great option. I can have a good attack with both here. It looks like I have no combat tricks or anything if I play this Slime Molding pre-combat using the slime to hold up the Gather Courage. That said, I really want to use the Gather Courage to get the rare off the battlefield for the opponent, so I'm fine making any trades that they're willing to take to, and I do end up going for the attack with both here eventually. Opponent trades with the 2/2, which again is okay for me, not ideal, but not horrible. And yeah, we play the Slime Molding, which hopefully is going to be annoying for them. Opponent has Caught in the Brights for it. They go for an attack with both, which is annoying for us. I believe I just kill the Scryfish here, even though it's not a threat. Making their draws better every turn is just pretty annoying for me. And I drop the Wild Mongrel. Now I leave the Basilisk back because we're not ahead in the race anymore. Opponent has Prava of the Steel Legion. This card is extremely powerful. Making 1/1s for 4 mana is pretty reasonable, and the fact that they attack as 2/5s is just insane. So yeah, the terror on turn 2 seemed fine, but really wishing I had it back at this point. Here I attack with the Wild Mongrel. Probably shouldn't have played the land pre-combat just in case. The opponent thinks about blocking. I would have been pretty happy if they did. I could have used the Gather Courage, but yeah. Opponent just passes. Presumably they're going to use Prava with the Zhalfirin Decoy, which is a nice combo for them. We get to go Painful Lesson here, find a land drop. Now we get to set up the Hornet Queen, which is going to be essential in terms of beating the Prava, which is just going to take over the ground really quickly here. Opponent has an eager first year. They're still able to make a 1/1 on my turn. They go for an attack. I take the damage, I think. No? Okay, I go for the very greedy Gather Courage, which does get the rare off the table, which is important, but I don't know. I think it's a questionable decision. They still have 4 mana open and 1 card in hand. I was pretty sure they didn't have any tricks from how they'd been playing, but still pretty scary. And here I go for a Hornet Queen. I should have left a land in my hand, I think. Just tapped the Iron Mirror because this Wild Mongrel attack, I really don't want to discard 2 cards to it to kill the Prava. I would if I had to, but yeah. Opponent decides to take it because, again, it does look like I maybe just have 2 lands in my hand. And opponent makes a 1/1. So now, yeah, the opponent just passes. I'm not totally sure I agree with this. I mean, I guess the idea is they want to tap the Lowland Basilisk later at some point, but I mean, they could have had a pretty decent attack here, just sending the 2 power creatures after tapping the Basilisk. So here, this time we're finally going to use Hornet Queen for offense, just as the 6 evasive power that it provides. So I think, yeah, we just attack with everything here. A little bit surprised the opponent didn't make a 1/1 and tap the Hornet Queen, because it seems like, you know, if you're not making a 1/1 on your turn, you probably want to make sure you don't die in the air, and yeah, crunching in for 6 is going to kill you pretty quickly. We drop a Bitterbow Sharpshooters, which we don't really care about, and we have that Gravedigger in case the Hornet Queen dies. We are kind of hoping the Hornet Queen dies, as usual. So opponent makes a 1/1, they tap our Basilisk, which I guess they were planning on. Now they make an extremely suspicious attack into the Bitterbow Sharpshooters. I'm almost certain the Bitterbow Sharpshooters is going to die here, but I don't really care. So I go ahead and throw it on the first year to block. Opponent has Survive the Night, which is a nice combat trick that's going to let them draw a card, dig for an answer. They have Summary Judgment on our Hornet Queen. Kind of a nice combo with the Zhalfirin Decoy, but a better combo with our Gravedigger here. So we do just get to Gravedigger, get back the Hornet Queen, and just like the last time we did it, the threat of a second Hornet Queen is enough to prompt a concession. Alright, and then here we are for game 2 of the finals. Keep this pretty sketchy hand, a little dubious, with 3 green cards and no forests, but we do have 2 swamps and 2 good black spells, so it seems reasonable enough. Opponent goes for the Raptor Companion, and again, I just kind of spew the terror here, killing the thing immediately because I don't want to have to take a bunch of damage. I'm already losing life to my Withering Boon, right? So don't want to lose extra life if I don't have to. And we do top deck the Forest. We're able to drop the Lowland Basilisk, which blocks the Paladin, which is really nice. Or I thought it blocked the Paladin. The Paladin crashes in here. We do go for the block because we have that Gather Courage backup, thinking that, okay, I can beat +2/+2. Not super sure what this could be. And yes, we have the Wild Instincts to kill the Paladin if we needed to, but I really don't want to take damage for no reason here. And the opponent has a Crook Claw Transmuter, which would be an excellent 2-for-1 for them, given that they have that first strike. But we do have that Gather Courage to save us here, which is going to be just an amazing way of kind of double spelling, getting their rare off the table once again. So now we are able to just attack. We've drawn a second forest, so we're able to get Colonian Tusker into play, holding up that Withering Boon in case they play Prava. But I decide that I'm able to spend it here, just have a nice efficient turn, hopefully nothing too good from them. They have a 2/2 with Shroud, so nothing amazing. They do crash in for 3. And now I've got a couple options here with my Wild Instincts. So I can turn the Colonian Tusker into a 5/5 and kill the Transmuter, but then I can't attack with it because I don't want to trade it for the Crystalline. I could put the Wild Instincts on my Lowland Basilisk, then I have a 3/5, which would still trade for the Crystalline, but I don't really care if the Basilisk trades for the Crystalline. I'd rather have my 3/3 in play than the 1/3 Death Touch. So decide to offer the trade, and the opponent takes it, which makes sense. Opponent has a 2-mana 1/1, and yeah, our 3/3 is able to crash in. We play the Springmane Servant. We have Gravedigger if we need to use it, but I don't think at this point we even want to. Opponent turns our mountain into a swamp, I believe. Attack with both here. Nothing dies. If something died, I would have played the Gravedigger, but because nothing did, I will just play this Twigwalker. And the opponent has a cancel. Now we have a better target for the Gravedigger. Glad that one didn't get countered, by the way. Opponent has Caught in the Brights on our 3/3, but our 3/2 is still going to be annoying for them. Attack with that, put the opponent down to 4, and the Gravedigger now gets back the Twigwalker, which can turn either of our creatures here into a lethal threat, of course. We do play the Twigwalker out pre-combat. I tap a little bit poorly here. I should leave up double green with their Dream Thrush in play. Not a huge deal, but just something to think about. And then here, the opponent, of course, blocks the bigger one. They don't want to die. And it looks like they don't have anything here, right? They have one card in hand. But just in case I'm wrong, I really don't want to crack this Twigwalker to try to push through lethal when it looks like I'm going to be in a winning position next turn as well. This line, I suppose, loses to a Wrath. They're able to answer all 3 of my creatures with a Wrath, but wouldn't they have already played one if they had it? So that means they'd have to top deck it, and cracking the Twigwalker just seems like a way to lose a game that I'm probably winning no matter what. Otherwise, that is. And yeah, the opponent draws, looks like a land, and yeah, 3 lethal threats. It's going to result in a victory for us, and another great draft. Not sure I made all the picks correctly. Made a couple plays that were questionable, but yeah, excellent deck. I'll pull it back up here on screen again. Performed super well. Again, I think slightly misbuilt. Pulse of Marasa should have been in over Twigwalker, but very happy about how this went, especially after 3-0-6-0ing with blue-white. Looks like blue-white flyers is not the only way to do it, as we now have racked up another 3-0-6-0 with the remaining 3/5 of the color pie. So, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will be bringing you more content soon.